Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 67 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And we are your guides to the... and we are your... And we are your guides to the epically aired stories, literally, literarily littering the Bible.
Yes.
And in this episode, we're covering 2 Samuel chapter 24 and 1 Chronicles chapter 21.
Yeah.
One story.
One story to rule them all.
Yes. It's my personal favorite inconsistency, error in the Bible.
Yeah.
Perfection,
yes.
as some might say.
Yeah.
It's my favorite one. So we're going to do an entire episode on it.
Well, yes, we did do an entire episode on it.
Yeah, but they're going to listen to an entire episode on it. Liz is like, you're not making me do another episode on this. Like,
Once
no.
was enough. Stuff like this, just like we get to the end of it and my brain is like just non-functionary.
It lowers your IQ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To try and like understand the hyperbole.
I know. Well, the entire point of it is to whittle down your critical thinking, right?
You think so? You think
Yeah.
that was their intention at the very beginning?
No, that's the intention of the interpretations of it. Yeah, at the very beginning, nobody knows. Yeah, nobody knows what the beginning meaning for it was or anything.
Yeah.
But the way they get you to think about it is all about getting rid of your critical thinking.
Yes. Yeah. Or secondary.
Yeah.
A bit about certain people's egos. Don't you think? Doesn't it take a bit of ego to be like, I know what the Bible means?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes an extraordinary amount of ego to say, I know what God thinks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of egos in this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Including our own.
Pastors are super egotistical people most of the time, you know? Especially if they come from successful churches and stuff.
Yeah.
So strap in and strap on for episode 67. Error 404. God not found.
What up?
What up?
Josh.
Yeah, Linz.
What up?
Holy crap, Linz.
What?
Nothing?
Oh. Think it's something exciting to share.
No, not really.
Rude.
Yeah. Previously on BSFA, David's son Absalom overthrew David. As soon as David had Absalom killed, there was a civil war led by someone named Sheba. And we got David's quote unquote last words, which was a poem, which
significantly before the time that he died.
Yeah. And he doesn't even die in this episode. So
no.
Yeah, we're still
we still have time
off
with David.
I keep hearing that these stories that are right at the end of 2 Samuel are some sort of appendix, I think is what they would call them, where it's like they're mishmashed like chronologically. That's what they say. But that's got to be the reason why they say that, is because they included his last words long before he's dead.
You think somebody would have maybe, I don't know,
thought of that?
Fixed that a while ago?
Yeah. I don't know why they would have just cut it right into I was thinking maybe it had something to do with where the scroll was ending. Maybe.
I don't think we'll ever actually know.
Or care. Counting on God. So we're starting today in 2 Samuel 24. And in fact, that's all we're covering.
Oh.
One chapter.
Wow.
Today.
Okay. Long one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not an especially long one.
No. And we're only just doing this once. So it's going to be a 10-minute podcast.
We'll see.
Okay.
There's stuff to talk about, though.
All right.
So, it starts off like this. Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go, count the people of Israel and Judah." So the king said to Joab and the commanders of the army who were with him, "Go through all the tribes of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, and make a census of the people, so that I may know how many there are." But Joab said to the king, "May the Lord your God increase the number of the people 100-fold, while the eyes of my lord the king can still see it. But why does my lord the king want to do this?" But the king's word prevailed against Joab and the commanders of the army. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to take a census of the people of Israel. So when they had gone through all the land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. Joab reported to the king the number of those who had been recorded. In Israel, there were 800,000 soldiers able to draw the sword, and those of Judah were 500,000.
So he just counted soldiers?
Pretty much, yeah.
Not women and children? Not actual numbers of people?
No.
So God got mad at Israel, the people of Israel, and in his wrath said, "Count them.
Count them.
I'm so angry. You must count them because I don't know the number myself."
That's a very good point. And why doesn't he just tell David, "Hey, here's how many people there are"? God, that is actually a really good point about why did they need to do any censuses ever?
If they're talking to God,
Yeah.
God should know.
Right.
Right?
He should be able to give an exact figure.
Right. Yeah.
Much better than actually manually taking a census for 9 months.
In 20 days.
Yeah.
So almost 10 months.
Right. Taking almost a full year to do a census.
Yes.
Yeah.
To count and then to come back and just say, here's the men that can fight. And, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like, it wasn't God who told David to do a census.
Right.
How boring. Could you imagine if God's whole purpose was just to give people secretarial work?
Yeah.
Like, go out and count for me.
Right.
I know what it is, but I want to see if our numbers match.
Just to point out too, they took 10 months and we got,
was it 700 and 500?
It's 800,000 soldiers and 500,000. So it's not even like exact numbers.
Is it clear? But like, is it clear to you whether it's like there's 800,000 total, and of those 800,000, 500,000
No. So it's North Kingdom and Southern Kingdom.
Okay.
So Israel, the Northern Kingdom, is 800.
Has 800, and then
the Southern Kingdom of Judah has 500,000.
Okay. So I don't know if people would have been apprehensive to be counted otherwise, and that's why David had to be like, God told me to do it because he's mad at you guys.
So one thing I've came across during this was people saying that, and we're going to be talking about this, but these are people whose interpretation of this I have questions about.
Okay, but
they did say that people would get worrisome back then about the king taking a census, because that would mean one of two things. Either they were going to send you off to fight, or they were going to raise your taxes. And so it was never really a good thing to get to get a census.
But if God said,
is according to the people I've been reading, but
God said,
but if God said it,
I'm angry with you. Let David count you.
Yeah.
I need to know how many of you there are. But just the soldiers.
Yeah.
Don't count the women and children and elderly.
Yeah. And we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in a little bit too. In previous censuses that the God asked for in Exodus and stuff like that, when Moses was around, it was kind of the same thing, where it was about like figuring out how many fighters you had.
Right.
Yeah. Or people who were able to labor. But that being said, we don't know why God is angry at Israel. We don't know why God is asking for a census at all.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Because I thought maybe I had just forgotten something from the previous episode.
Nope.
Okay.
It's a non sequitur.
Okay.
There's no explanation for why God is angry.
Because when you started it and you started it with literally like something previously had happened, I was like, what?
No. So
did I forget like what we talked about last time?
Right.
Was there an event that happened?
I think I saw some theories that this might have had to do with God being angry with, I think, Sheba staging a revolt and everything, but like there's nothing really to back that up.
Right. He's just got a bug up his butt one day.
Like literally the last stuff before this was the David poetry stuff.
Oh, his last words.
Yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
And there was a poem even before that of his.
Right.
So that's the last stuff we covered.
Gotcha.
And then we just come into God was angry at Israel.
Okay, good. Because I felt a little confused, but I thought it was just my lack of retaining our conversations. So I didn't want to ask because I didn't want you to be like, we just talked about this. Okay.
No, it's more like, it's the Bible being fucking terrible at telling stories again. Yeah. So, we don't know why God is asking for a census. We don't know why Joab thinks it's actually a bad thing. Joab is saying, why would you want to do this?
Right.
So we don't know.
He does question David a lot.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he's still alive. It's because he's the
he's
cleaner.
The one who does all the killing.
He's the fixer.
Yeah. But afterward, David was stricken to the heart because he had numbered the people. David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, O Lord, I pray you, take away the guilt of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. When David rose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say to David, Thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you. Choose one of them and I will do it to you. So Gad came to David and told him. He asked him, Shall 7 years of famine come to you on your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your foes while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days pestilence in your land? Now consider and decide what answer I shall return to the one who sent me. Then David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Let us fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is great. But let me not fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from that morning until the appointed time, and 70,000 of the people died, from Dan to Beersheba. But when the angel stretched out his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented concerning the evil, and said to the angel who was bringing destruction among the people, It is enough. Now stay your hand. The angel of the Lord was standing by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven, and in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem. Then David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell on their faces. When David saw the angel who was destroying the people, he said to the Lord, I alone have sinned, and I, the shepherd, have done evil. But these sheep, what have they done? Let your hand, I pray, be against me and against my father's house. So, that kind of a thing.
That was all very confusing and weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unlike most of the Bible.
Well, yeah. Okay, so God tells him to do a census and he does it, and then he feels bad about doing it.
He was stricken
in the heart for numbering the people.
Right.
So God's like, I'm sorry you feel bad. I'll punish you if you want. Pick a punishment.
No, not exactly like that. So that's interesting though, that's how you hear it.
That is totally how I gather.
Because to me, and the way it's written, especially when we get to the Chronicles version, God is pissed at him for doing this.
For doing the census?
Yeah.
That he asked for.
Yeah.
He's pissed at David for doing the census that he asked for.
Yeah. You're acting like that's a weird thing. Like,
I thought God was pissed at David for being upset about doing it.
Right.
Because God's like, oh, well, I told you to do it. You shouldn't feel bad.
Yeah.
But I guess since you want to feel bad, pick a punishment.
No.
Punishment roulette.
No, God's upset at him for doing it because it was a sin to do it.
What the fuck? What
right?
a fucking gaslighting motherfucker.
This is why we're doing a whole episode on this chapter. Because we haven't even gotten to the weird stuff yet.
No, because then you get to the so then David is like no human hands, so not people chasing him, and then I don't know why that wouldn't mean famine, but that is taken to insinuate like we'll take the 3 days of pestilence, which to me makes sense. It's the shortest amount of time. That's what I would have chosen too.
Yeah.
And pestilence is
like sickness.
Is it just
disease,
is it sickness and disease, or I took it to mean like bugs?
Oh, it could be, but I like took it to be illness.
Okay, and that makes sense.
Yeah,
because people died, and I can't imagine locusts just killing a bunch of people.
Right, they would normally eat a bunch of crops, and then eventually there would be famine. Right. I wonder if pestilence, like if it does mean pest, it might mean like mice or something that spread disease, something like that.
Pestilence, a fatal epidemic disease, especially bubonic plague.
Which I think bubonic came from mice.
It was like the
lice,
fleas or the lice or something. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't just a random sickness out of nowhere.
No.
It was an angel.
It was. Yeah.
It was taking his little magic sword wand and being like, you get a sickness and you get a sickness and you get
like
a
shitty
sickness.
Oprah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was about to take out an entire city.
Jerusalem. Yeah.
And God was like, hold on. Let's calm down.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that it specifically says the Lord relented concerning the evil, So like the angel, his angel is doing evil.
Is it one of the, now I just picture that God, like, I've never pictured, are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse angels?
Yes.
So this to me feels like one of those.
Yeah. Like you can see where the inspiration comes from.
Right.
In this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously that was written, Revelation is written much longer after this was written, but you can see where that inspiration comes from.
Definitely. Who's just hanging out there standing in between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Standing.
It sounds like, towering over, like he was a very, David and giants.
Right.
Always with the giants. So then God tells David that he needs to buy that threshing floor that the angel was standing by and build an altar on it, which he does. And the pestilence ends.
Right.
Apparently after only 1 day instead of 3, but I don't remember seeing where it said that it ended after 1 day. Just somebody mentioned that. Okay. So I might be wrong about that, but
yeah. Is this tied to an actual legitimate historic event?
I doubt it. No. Like who would even be able to tell? Like stuff like this would probably have happened quite a bit.
Well, yeah, sure.
We just had one a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So and that's kind of the story is that.
Okay.
Right. One thing I think is interesting is I believe that threshing floor that he purchases is what ends up becoming where they build the temple. So I think this is what this story is kind of supposed to be here for, is to explain how they got the land where they build the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple.
Okay.
Little bit of context.
Right. So
what the story's for.
So just a quick little tale, a quick little weird, angry tale.
Yeah.
About why David made a land purchase where he did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of just being
it's for.
Instead of just being like God said here.
Right. Yeah.
Should have been much shorter, much less weird.
Right. Yeah. So just to remind folks, Chronicles was written hundreds of years, about 300 years after Samuel, the book of Samuel, was compiled together. So the writings of Samuel were likely older writings, might have actually came from the time of David, some of them at least. And then they got compiled together about 300 years before the book of Chronicles was written. The writer of Chronicles probably only had the book of Samuel and Kings, you know, the one that we haven't gotten to yet, to go off of for their version of their history, right? And so they copied a bunch of stuff verbatim from Samuel and Kings.
Which is why we don't
cover too much of it.
Technically, we're doing both of these at the same time, but we don't hear a lot from both.
Right.
Because one is verbatim of the other.
Right, exactly. So like I'll call out differences and stuff like that. So Chronicles has this story as well, but there's one specific difference, and I'll see if you can catch it.
Okay.
It's kind of early on here. Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count the people of Israel. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the army, "Go, number Israel from Beersheba to Dan and bring me a report so that I may know their number." But Joab said, "May the Lord increase the number of his people 100-fold. Are they not, my lord, the king, all of them the Lord's servants? Why then should the Lord require this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel?" But the king's word prevailed against Joab. So Joab departed and went through all Israel and came back to Jerusalem. Joab gave the total count of the people to David. In all Israel there were 1,100,000 men who drew the sword, and in Judah 470,000 who drew the sword. But he did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, for the king's command was abhorrent to Joab.
I mean, there's more than one small difference.
There really is. I realized that as we were playing.
There's one giant difference.
There's one giant difference.
In that this was the work of Satan.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's not like he pops up super often.
Correct. Yeah.
In these stories.
At all in the Old Testament.
Yeah. So, but what it does is it makes it make more sense. It makes it make both stories more sense. It makes this make more sense, and it makes David's guilt and God's anger make more sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're writing this 300 years later,
and you're
maybe you would change it.
And you're like, why is God mad about David doing something he told him to do?
Right.
It must be that it was Satan.
Satan? Yeah. So the Bible in one book is saying that God told David to conduct a census. In another book telling the same story, it says that Satan told David to conduct a census. Therefore, according to the perfect and infallible Bible, God and Satan are the same person.
That's interesting.
Yes. This is why this is my favorite fallacy in the Bible.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Or favorite contradiction.
It's just really like, I appreciate the sects of Christianity that are like, no, the Bible's not perfect. Obviously.
Right.
Like, we know that.
Right.
It's written by man. Man's not perfect.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Bible's not perfect. I will never understand those diehard Christians
who think the
Bible is perfect.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
We'll get to understand them a little today.
Well, and I don't, but like, but how are you not just like the parts of the Bible that are like the Jesus parts?
Yeah.
Like those are perfect because they are the words of Jesus.
Except those aren't even perfect too.
I know. But like at least
there's errors in that as well. Yeah.
But how, I just can't.
I know.
My brain starts breaking apart in pieces.
I know.
I can't talk anymore.
Oh, wait till we get into it.
All right, great.
Wait till we get into it.
Super great.
So, yeah.
But the other smaller pieces that are different, the numbers.
Right. So, in Samuel, Israel had 800,000 people, and Judah had 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
In Chronicles, Israel had 1.1 million. And Judah had 470,000.
Which just seems super specific.
Yeah.
Although it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
And also they left out two.
Yeah, they left out Levi and the tribes of Levi and Benjamin in the numbering. Now, I did not dig deeply into this part. I remember seeing something about how I think Joab, for some reason, was part of those tribes or something like that. It had something to do with that. And so therefore he was leaving those out because they meant something to him or something like that.
He was so offended by what he had to do that he didn't want to subject people he was related to account.
I guess it doesn't make sense though, because Joab was also his nephew, David's nephew. So, and David's from Judah. So I don't know. There might be something to that. I didn't go down that road.
Are the tribes of Benjamin and Levi like considered to be like a higher echelon amongst the tribes?
Levi is the tribe of priests.
Right.
That's the Levites.
Okay.
Right. And then Benjamin, the only thing about Benjamin is that it's a smaller tribe that I believe shared the same land as the tribe of Judah. Okay. So like I think they had a bit of land within the land of Judah.
Yeah.
So
I could see wanting to leave the priests out of it.
Yeah.
Right. As like a respect, like a small modicum of respect to God.
Yeah.
And not like wanting to piss God off entirely, being like, I'm not going to count the priests. They're not fighters anyway.
Right.
Right?
I would think, but I don't know.
They're not like warrior monks or anything like that.
Yeah. I don't remember any time we saw a priest fight so far in the Bible.
I feel like that's a movie in the making.
I know, right?
Yeah.
The numbers are different, but as we all know, God can't count. In case you have any doubt that this is the same story, we do also get this afterwards. But God was displeased with this thing, and he struck Israel. David said to Gad, I have sinned greatly in that I have done this thing. But now, please, remove the guilt of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. The Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say to David, Thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you. Choose one of them so that I may do it to you. So Gad came to David and said to him, Thus says the Lord, take your choice, either 3 years of famine or 3 months of devastation by your foes while the sword of your enemies overtakes you, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, pestilence on the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory of Israel. Now decide, what answer shall I return to the one who sent me? Then David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Let me fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is very great. But let me not fall into human hands. And from there out, the Chronicles version is pretty much the same as the Samuel version. One weird difference is they renamed the person who owned the threshing floor. In 2 Samuel, it was like Araunah. And in 1 Chronicles, it's Ornan.
Okay.
Ornan.
Ornan.
Both are called Jebusites, though.
Okay.
So,
I do appreciate, again, the clarity in like adding, instead of just saying pestilence, they're like, the angel will bring pestilence.
It mentions an angel specifically.
And
3 days of the sword of the Lord, pestilence on the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory. Yeah.
Yes. So then when you go into the story of the pestilence.
Yes.
And the angel pops up, you're not like, what?
Yeah.
Where did the fucking angel? An angel is the thing that brings pestilence? And like, all of us nowadays are like, of course an angel brings pestilence. I know obviously about the 4 horsemen.
Science.
Yeah, Avi.
Watch the Weather Channel.
But back then, many people were probably like, an angel is the reason why we're sick? That's fucked up.
Yeah.
An angel of the Lord made us sick?
Right.
I don't know. That doesn't feel right to me.
No, it doesn't feel right at all.
I didn't do anything. I got counted and now I'm sick.
Right.
This isn't.
I didn't want to get counted.
No, I don't want either of these things. This David guy sucks.
Right. Yeah. No, nobody ever said that. Apparently. Another interesting difference is an extra line right at the end of the First Chronicles version. At that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him at the threshing floor of Ornan, he made his sacrifices there. For the tabernacle of the Lord that Moses had made in the wilderness and the altar of burnt offering were at that time in the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, for he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. So this is where the NRSV called this section of the text the place chosen for the temple. So that's the story. That's what the Bible says about this. Okay. Contradictory, right?
Just a wee bit.
Plainly, like on its face, plainly contradictory,
oh,
right?
yeah, like a child could figure that shit out.
Right. Like there's nothing you go into that reading it that stands out as like, oh, this is an explanation for why this would be this way.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
I feel like you're leading.
I'm just kind of pointing out that like
you're leading into something.
There's no good reason to think that this isn't a contradiction. So anyway, I looked up some interpretations of this.
Great.
And here's one from a pastor at Calvary Church, which I believe is in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Calvary?
Yeah.
They just have Calvary churches everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
This specific one. So this guy's name is Skip Heitzig. So this is the first skip clip.
I want you to notice something in the text that we just read. It says, the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. You notice the word he. That pronoun is capitalized in my Bible. Is it in yours? So when it's capitalized, it is a reference to God. However, that's only in English. In the Hebrew language, the language that this book was written in, there is no capitalizing with the Hebrew letters.
You see where this is going?
If you compare this verse with a parallel verse, 2 Chronicles 21,
First Chronicles.
It does sound like there's a contradiction because in 2 Samuel 21, it says, Satan moved David to number Israel. So who did? Answer, both. God is sovereign. God is overall. God is going to use Satan's moving and temptation in David's life to enact his judgment upon the nation. So the he here could very well not be capitalized as a reference to Satan. So follow me here. The anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he, small h, taking into consideration 2 Chronicles 21, he, Satan, moved David against them to say, go number the people of Israel.
It's so obvious.
He took something kind of confusing and made it infinitely more confusing.
I know, right?
But also I'm sorry. I've seen lots of Christians bend themselves in half to make something work.
Yeah.
But you can't say that a person that has never showed up, thing, idea.
Deity? Are you talking about God?
I'm talking about Satan.
Oh, Satan.
Who has never showed up at any point in the text that they're referring to so far.
Yep.
And then we're supposed to infer that because it's a lowercase h in Hebrew that it's meant to be Satan.
It wouldn't even
though he fucking said they don't use the uppercase h in Hebrew anyway.
Yeah, they don't have capitalization in Hebrew.
So
he's providing himself an out, right? By simply saying that this he, even though it's capitalized here, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Like that could just be an error in what the Bible, because the Bible is perfect.
Error.
You're starting from the presumption that the Bible is perfect.
Right.
So therefore you have to decide, all right, that he must mean Satan. In order for this all to work, that he must mean Satan. That's the only thing that it can be, according to him, at least.
Yeah, but that the idea that you have to like extrapolate onto something means a lack of perfection.
300 years before the Chronicles version comes along. So
nobody
people are reading that.
Even thought about Satan.
Right.
Right.
So all you need to do to worm your way out of this one is to pretend you're talking about Satan in the Samuel version, which has no mention of Satan whatsoever.
He had his little thing backwards too, didn't he? He
was saying Second Chronicles when.
Well,
I
thought he said
first.
Samuel was the one that had Satan in it too in the clip. He just seemed like he was backwards in he was saying.
I might not have caught that part, but yeah. Skip talks about this in great detail. He says that Satan actually means adversary, which we talked about before when we talked about Job.
Yep.
You know, in the book of Job, where you probably get the most Satan throughout the Bible. He's almost like a lawyer against Job or something like that. He's generally against Job. Right?
Satan.
Yeah, Satan actually means adversary. According to Skip, there was likely an adversarial nation threatening Israel because Satan gets mentioned. He thinks that means there's an adversarial nation against Israel, which
would then
that's a leap, you know?
Right. But what that does is then if there's an adversarial nation against Israel, then that might move David to want to know how many fighters he has.
Exactly. So is it Satan, the fallen angel, or a foreign nation?
Right.
Right. Is that which is it that this book Chronicles is talking about?
Right.
Right. Again, Skip says both. And God used Satan, who used this foreign nation against David, so that David would end up facing the challenge of, you know, like having this pestilence and everything and come out of it better off than he was before. You know, like that's his idea is that this is a test for him to end up being better off. Never mind all that 70,000 of Israelites who had to die for it.
Right. Where does Skip get all of these ideas? Is the Lord talking to him?
I'm sure he would think so. That's a good question, though. That's a good question. Because I kind of got something to say about that in a bit. And he compares this all to Job's experience as if that story was really happened. Like that's another big thing to keep in mind is Skip seems to think
the story of Job really happened.
The story where God says he has a pet Godzilla actually happened. The point of this story, according to Skip, is that you should trust God. David didn't trust God. When he thought he was going to need to fight another nation, he took a census of his fighters instead of just trusting God. So therefore, you shouldn't, according to Skip, you shouldn't trust your retirement account. You should trust God. You should have a retirement account, just don't trust it. I guess is what God meant when he wrote the story that has nothing to do with retirement accounts. Yeah, and I'm trying not to talk bad about Skip specifically, although we'll hear some more from him in a minute.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm not trying to take down anybody, but
no, but you know.
But we'll hear more from Skip in a minute.
I'll just say this. I can't imagine that Skip's intentions are filled with malice. He's simply trying to do what we're trying to do, but he's trying to remain Christian about the whole idea.
From my impression, and I don't know anything about this guy besides this one video I watched of his, I bet he believes what he's saying.
Right.
You know, he believes it, but there's also the issue of the different outcomes of the census, right?
Yep. So
let's see what Skip says about that.
Okay.
And there were in Israel 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword. That is, they were well trained and they were battle ready. And the men of Judah were 500,000 men. Now, if you happen to know your Bible or read it in advance and you read the parallel passage in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, you've noticed that there is a seeming discrepancy, a seeming contradiction. In fact, some would read, go, Bible contradicts itself. These are ignorant people who say these things.
Fuck you, Skip.
Because it says in that chapter that there were 1,100,000 men of Israel. And here, the number is a bit different. It says that there were 800,000, but here it says something it doesn't say in Second Chronicles. It says
First Chronicles.
Or First Chronicles 21 is the chapter. It says there were in Israel 800,000 valiant men. There could have well been, and were indeed, 1,100,000 men, but not all of them were battle ready.
Oh my God.
Not all of them were well trained. Not all of them were valiant men. But of those in the total number
Skip.
of 1.1 million,
Come on.
870,000 were valiant men ready to go to war. That's the number after almost 10 months of counting. And the men of Judah, also verse 9, were 500,000, where in 1 Chronicles 21, they're given the number 470,000. And some believe that they're rounding up, like they want you to do when you buy groceries now, round up and donate it to a charitable cause of some sort. It could be that they were just rounding up.
That's it.
Oh, Skip. Oh, dear Skip.
Just like how they want you to do with the groceries nowadays. He doesn't even seem like that old of a dude,
Dear
too,
Skip.
but he sounds so old. Anyway,
So
yeah, ignorant people.
So
Oof, that drove me up the
300
wall.
years
Yeah.
after they wrote 800,000,
Yes.
the person writing Chronicles had
Different idea.
something else that said the actual numbers besides the book of Samuel, and was like, let's just tell all of the men.
So you're saying this is Skip's idea?
Yes.
Skip's idea is
that there must have been another source besides the book of Samuel,
right, or
that
something.
they got this number from.
That inevitably that's must be what Skip is saying,
Right.
but he doesn't back it up.
What is it?
There's
Does it
nothing-
literally just say 1.1 million men? I thought it said men who could draw the sword.
Yeah. Both. It said men who could draw the sword.
Does it say valiant?
It doesn't say valiant in the NRSV,
Okay.
but most other versions do say valiant there. And there is a word there that in Hebrew, I looked up the Hebrew
Okay.
because fuck you, Skip. I looked up the Hebrew and there is a word there that's extra, but it also could mean rich. It could mean it's used in a bunch of different ways throughout the Bible. But at the end of the day, there's no explanation for there's no clear statement of that it was actually winnowing down, that it wasn't giving the full number.
Yeah.
It's just the valiant men.
Right.
And then the fact that the other number is still higher than the Chronicles version. So it's 500. Oh, they were rounding up.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And
They reported one number low.
Yeah.
And the other number higher.
Exactly. Yeah.
They didn't just pick a method. They just did whatever they wanted to do. And then the chronicler was like, I'm going to get as specific as possible, which is still not very specific. But I'm going to add 300,000 to one and take 30,000 away from the other.
Right. Exactly.
Arbitrarily. Oh, wait, it's not arbitrarily if you're Skip. It's that there were 300,000 men who weren't valiant.
Yeah.
Meaning untrained. But it says who drew the sword.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which To me, insinuates that they were trained.
Right. So yeah, and I don't know why actually they changed these numbers, like why the chronicler used different numbers. I don't know. Maybe they thought that there was a good reason that there might have been more. Yeah. It doesn't matter because like you need to provide evidence for, like, if you say this is why.
Right.
You need to provide some sort of evidence for that.
It would be better for Christianity if people like Skip were just like, yeah, the person who wrote Chronicles fucked up. They didn't copy the text verbatim.
Right.
Because it's clear that's what's happening. You can't take one story and then put it in a whole separate book of the Bible, almost verbatim, and not admit that this was done later and copied.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it would be better for Christianity as a religion for them to just say that.
Right.
As opposed to trying to explain something that does not make sense.
Yeah. But then you have to deal with the fact that, like, how does a perfect God, perfect, all-knowing, all-powerful God, write an imperfect Bible?
Well, that's when you blame it on the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not God.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I could figure that shit out.
Yeah. Anyway, so Christians love to claim. I wanted to point out a few things because I could not stop writing notes about this stuff. Christians love to claim atheists take verses out of context when we point out errors, but they ignore the actual context, like that Chronicles was written 300 years after the book of Samuel was compiled. But Skip, instead of confronting this inconsistency head on, has decided to add a bunch of stuff to these stories that isn't actually there in order to fit whatever he wants to say. And a good way to know that is by looking at how other pastors interpret these stories. Right. So here's one from Daniel Batarasse, something like that, out of Chicago.
What do you see in verse 2? That I may know. It's all about David. It's all for David. It's all to satisfy this curiosity, and a curiosity in order to build up self-confidence. I just want to know how many people I have under my leadership and my reign. I want to know how much we've grown. I want to know our strength. I want to know our military might, which is confirmed later on, that David is not necessarily interested in the wider number. He wants to know specifically about his army. And Joab here, out of all the guys to protest this, Joab is the guy who protests this. That's how you know there's something fishy about this. He reads David like a book. Like it's all over him for why he wants to do this. And that's why he stands up and he says, listen, may the Lord add to the number 100 times in your lifetime. But why do you delight in this thing? Why are you trying to do this? What's your real motive here? And he's challenging David because he can discern that this is rooted in pride. This is rooted in arrogance. There is something here about David wanting to confirm and celebrate himself. And Joab is the one who notices it. Joab. And I thought to myself, reading about Joab, I said, where was this man's courage? Where was this man's conviction? We'll get to that in a moment, but this is what we're seeing here. Pride is what is consuming David. That was the door that Satan had access through.
So David's being arrogant.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
which,
that's
definitely more likely than the first
than Skip's.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's one interpretation of it. And then another one here is from a church called Calvary Cork. I didn't catch who the pastor was, but
nor was there anything illegal per se in God's law about taking a census of the people of Israel, as long as it's done according to the biblical commands that were plainly laid out in the books of Moses. Exodus chapter 30 and Numbers chapter 5 give details as how the leader of the Israelites is meant to count the Israelites.
Right. So David, in this version, David didn't follow the laws for how to take a census, and therefore God was pissed.
Oh,
right.
That's less of a leap.
It is less of a leap. Except for the fact that they don't call it out, obviously.
In the Bible.
Yeah, in the story itself,
right.
They don't call out that this is what the problem was.
Right.
So you have to just you do have to take a leap
Yes.
and say
It's
that
just a
that's
much
what
smaller,
it could be.
more
Yeah.
likely pill to like easier pill to swallow.
Doesn't explain the Satan thing whatsoever, really. Doesn't
Right.
explain why one version says Satan, the other version doesn't.
No, it really just explains the weirdness of in Samuel,
Yeah.
God saying to take a census and then being mad.
Right. Just that part
Yeah.
of it. But and there are laws about how everyone would have to pay a fee for the census. So basically everybody would have to pay half a shekel, whether you're rich or poor, when they're taking a census in order to pay for the census, I think, or it went to the priests or something. And then there was another law around who they would count. I think we talked about that briefly earlier. Just, certain ages of men would be counted, and it would be about, who could labor, who could be fighters and stuff like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, though, it's a guess that that's what is the reason why God was angry about it.
Oh, but okay. So hold on, wait a minute. So I think that in what you just said makes me understand Skip's explanation a little bit more on the numbers. If he's assuming that they followed the census correctly.
If Skip is
assuming they did the census.
When it comes to Skip, I don't, because I watched a lot more of this sermon than we played. I don't remember him ever even mentioning the laws.
No, I know
of that stuff.
I'm making an inference,
Right.
much like he is doing,
Okay.
about his thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I guess we're all just guessing what people think now.
Right? Yeah, right.
So if he understood the rules of like a legal census, as a biblical census, I guess, right? Where these are the people you're allowed to count.
Yeah.
And if he thinks, okay, so in the first part they said valiant men, right? But if they're also counting men just of a certain age, there's men in there who aren't fighting. So it makes sense to him that the number in Chronicles would be bigger, because that's including men who may not fight, but also could work. Although they do say drew the sword.
Yeah, and Judah was lower.
Right. Now I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm with the rounding thing with him on that second.
You're with the
one.
rounding thing?
I'm with the rounding thing
Okay.
with him. That is a reasonable explanation to me.
I
That
don't think so.
explanation is just, to me, like, if you're gonna give a bullshit reason, like, just saying rounding makes way more fucking sense.
I don't even want to give him that, though, because the number that's being rounded is already a rounded number.
Right.
It's 470,000.
Which is, it's never that.
Slightly more rounded.
Yeah.
But, to say 500,000,
Right.
but it's already a rounded number.
Right. I was specifically talking about the 800 too, because that
Sure.
disparity is so much bigger.
Yeah, I got you. But then, Skip doesn't call out that, hey, this came 300 years later.
Right.
Where would they possibly get the
Again,
information?
I'm making an inference on an inference.
Sure.
It's like a whole like thing down a rabbit hole. It's like a game of telephone.
It's like a hole that a rabbit might go down.
It's like a game of telephone that was written so long ago and then written again 300 years after that. And then a bunch of men have been trying to figure it out since then.
Right.
And I'm making a guess on what their brains are thinking, which is fucked up.
Yeah. Nobody should have to guess what
No.
their brains are thinking.
No.
So here's what I think happened.
Okay. Here's the Josh of it all.
This kind of what I think happened is most likely at some point it was considered evil to take a census in Israel. I bet. And again, this is just me reading it and
right.
from what I've seen. I think most likely at some point it was considered evil to take a census in Israel. And this story came from that time. There was good reason why people didn't want to take a census back then. Like we talked about earlier, it meant either you were going to have to go off and fight for your king or the king was going to raise your taxes. So you can see how a culture would decide that taking a census is evil. So even if you think that any of these reasons make sense and that somehow this is not an error in the Bible, it's reasonable to call this confusing and unclear. it's not unreasonable for a person to read this and come away thinking that there's an error here. Isn't that then, in and of itself, an error in the Bible? So even if you think it's perfect, even if you think that he is supposed to be lowercase and it is supposed to be Satan there, if all of what Skip says is right or any of the other excuses a pastor will give is right, isn't the fact that it is confusing an error in the Bible?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't have to be confusing. It could have been written
clearly. Yeah.
It's not nothing. It's nothing new.
No, I think we've
podcast.
said this about a million different places.
We probably have. I always like pointing it out because
Yeah.
you never know which episode is going to be somebody's first.
Something that is, yes, every podcast is somebody's first podcast.
Right.
Just much like the great Stanley said about comic books.
Yes, exactly.
Something that somebody is supposed to use as a tool to live their life in a righteous way so that they can get into heaven and be judged by God to be worthy of being in heaven. Why is it ambiguous?
Right. Exactly.
Why wouldn't God just say, here's what the fuck you have to do to get into my heaven?
Yep.
If you don't do these things, guess what? You don't get to go to heaven.
Right. Yeah, if your salvation is hanging on this, if your eternity in heaven or hell or nothingness, if that's what you believe in instead of hell, if eternity is hanging on it, why wouldn't it be clearly written?
Yeah.
And that itself is an error. I'm on the side of the people who say that, if a perfect God wrote a message to humanity, that message would have to be perfect. I agree with that. I think that makes sense that like an all-powerful, all-knowing God could not have written something imperfect.
Sure.
So therefore, the Bible
is not. If there is a God, that's not his thing.
That's not. It has nothing to do with whatever deity could exist.
Do you imagine what heaven would be like if God did write this Bible purposefully to be ambiguous,
right?
And a bunch of people got to heaven, but like differently, right?
Yeah.
And they all had to interact with each other once they got up there. Could you imagine the headache that God would have to deal with? Constantly people coming up and being like, would you tell this guy that you were the one that told David to do the census and not Satan?
It really,
and then the other guy's like, fucking lowercase h, bitch.
What's funny is I've never thought about this before, but how hilarious would it be like if you went to heaven and like God was just letting everybody in?
Yeah.
It's like all these people who like just completely dedicated their lives to abstinence, or to celibacy or whatever and everything, and it's just anybody could get in. You know, like,
oh God, that would be if there is a heaven.
Yeah.
If there is a heaven, that is what I want it to be. And God's just sitting up there on his little God throne, like just eating popcorn and being like, yeah, this is all for my own entertainment.
You guys really got weird with it down there. I don't know what your deal was. Like, why would I not want you to be coming to heaven? Why would I create you just to send you to hell?
I created two people like so long ago, and you guys just went nuts after that.
I just keep showing up. It's like a house party that just is getting more and more derailed.
I do not appreciate the lack of consistency between people who are heads of the same religion. Like, you got your Skips, and then the other two fuckers that you played, like, are not saying the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
But all three of them are leaders within Christianity.
Yep.
If I moved and went to this person's church and then went to this person's church and then went to this person's church, it's three completely different ideas.
Right. And if you can't figure out what that meaning is, then it's as if there is no meaning.
Right.
Then there is no intent by God.
Right.
With this to deliver a meaning with the story.
Exactly.
If we can't determine what that meaning is.
It's like if you worked at a job where you had three bosses.
Yes.
And each of them were telling you to do a
three
job
different things.
Completely three different ways.
Right.
Like the same job,
right,
but three different ways.
Yeah.
And every time you did it this person's way, the other two people would yell at you.
Right.
And then the people who own the company are like, I don't fucking care how you do your job.
Right.
That's how, like, if there was a God, to me, that would be like, don't listen to those assholes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or you could even look at it like somebody broke into your house and I'm really constructing this off the top of my head. If somebody broke into your house let's say you're a banker.
Okay.
And somebody broke into your bank. Okay. And the police are like, yeah, somebody broke into your bank.
You're like, thanks, I didn't need you to tell me that. Figured that out on my own.
Yeah. And they're like, we reviewed the tapes and so it looks like they came in through the window here and then they broke into the safe by using a wrench and everything. Or they came in through the door and they broke in with some dynamite. Or they, these different, and it's like, I need to know which one it is.
Right.
I need in order for me to be safe, I need to know which one it is, right?
It really creates like what these pastors, preachers, priests, whatever the fuck they are, people of God are doing is creating basically a Bible that is like a choose your own adventure.
Right. Yeah. What I wish they would do is just embrace the I don't know of it.
Yeah.
Just embrace it. Like these guys could be doing is being like, this is weird. We don't really know what this means. Right. Why is it like this? Let's talk about it.
Yes.
And you could come up with your own shit around it.
Well, yeah,
but
that's exactly
be
right.
At least honest about it.
If you were Skip and you were like, this is what I think.
Yeah.
This is what I think they mean in the Bible. Not this is what
this means.
This is what this means.
Yeah.
Because dude over in Chicago does not agree with you, and dude in fucking Cork Cavalry also does not agree with you. So which one is it? Is it yours or his or his? And you guys are all men of God. Who am I supposed to believe?
Right. Exactly.
Does this fucking story even matter when it comes to my eternal soul?
No.
Because it doesn't.
No, but it does when it comes to whether or not the book you're reading has anything to do with your eternal soul.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, let's see. Another note I have is you can shove your head up your ass and call it a vision from God if you want, but I don't have to agree with it, and you can't pass legislation based on it.
Oh, someone was real angry that day.
I was. And I also wrote...
You watched too many YouTube videos that day, I think
I did. Yeah, I was watching a lot of religious shit.
Josh gets real depressed and angry. You can always tell the amount of Christian YouTube that he's watched.
So that's the inconsistency. That's the fallibility. That's the perfection of 2 Samuel 24 and 1 Chronicles chapter 21. So not a believer yet?
Me?
In Jesus?
No.
In Jeebus?
A
believer in Jeebus?
This story didn't have anything to do with Jesus.
No, it didn't. Not a believer in the Bible.
Do I believe in the Christian God?
No.
Not yet.
No, it doesn't seem to give any good reason to believe in one.
No. I don't know that I want a God who tells somebody to do something and is angry about it. I'm just going to completely ignore the second story.
Yeah. The only thing that's weird about the second story then is that taking a census is a sin.
Right.
That's literally the only weird thing about it then.
Yeah.
But
I would really it would really help me as a person. Like if they were really trying to get somebody like me to buy into Christianity.
Yeah.
Like it would have been nice, like when they were writing this thing way back in the day, like if they just put in a little bit more detail.
Right.
Like they had a lot of detail about shit I don't care about.
Yeah.
But like, why is it bad to take a census?
Right.
Like, I mean, we can look at it historically and infer that that's what they're talking about, but
why don't they say it?
Why don't they just say it in the Bible?
Yeah.
If it's something that's bad to do, and part of the Bible is to like tell you not to do these bad things,
right?
Why wouldn't you put what's bad about taking a census in the Bible?
Yeah. one aspect of that is the whole idea that we have developed, especially in like American Christianity and modern Christianity, is that the Bible is there as a book meant for your personal growth, right? When a lot of it isn't meant
Right.
for that at all.
No.
Like this stuff,
Doesn't matter.
none of this was written for individual person's spiritual growth or anything
No.
like that. It's documenting the
David.
lineage, David, his story. It's
Yeah.
documenting Saul's story,
The history of Israel.
it's documenting the history of Israel, and that's what Kings is going to be doing.
Pre-Christianity.
Yeah, it's a government document,
Right.
that they put together.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you're trying to like turn it into chicken soup for the fucking soul.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, well, yeah, you have to bend way backwards in order to do that. But
Sure.
next time, I haven't read ahead at
Next
all.
time
So I don't
is
know.
next time.
Next time is next time. So this was the end of 2 Samuel, though. So we are getting into 1 Kings.
And that still aligns with, like, Chronicles covers Samuel and Kings? Or
Correct.
just- okay.
Correct.
So
Yep.
we're still going to be running
Yep,
side by
stories.
side if there's differences.
Yes, if there's differences, and we might get some extra stories in Chronicles that aren't in Kings
Okay.
and so forth. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Kings is still about David.
yes, it's for as long as David's still around in
Okay.
Kings. Yes.
Okay. So
And then
the
it will.
pluralization of Kings is valid.
Yes,
Multiple
because
kings.
it's going to be about his descendants.
Okay.
Really.
Cool.
Yeah.
The one that shouldn't be.
The one
Right.
that shouldn't be.
The one that's like the youngest.
Oh, Solomon.
Yes.
Yeah.
King Solomon.
He's not the youngest.
The
He's-
baby guy.
Yeah, he's not the youngest, but he was very far down in the line of
Right.
what is that called?
The lineage, the succession.
It's a line of succession. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very far down in the line of succession, yet somehow ends up getting
Well, he's wise,
moved up. Yeah, he is considered wise. Yes,
according to the Bible and the one
Yeah.
story I know about him.
right. And David was considered good.
Oh. Well, now I have a lot of fun to look forward to.
I know, like let's keep our expectations low.
So now in my head, I'm like, well, maybe Solomon was serious about cutting the baby in half.
I know, right?
And one of the women
Maybe.
in the room was like, no, we're not doing that.
He's like, it would be easy. I got a sword right
Cut it
here.
in half. Yeah,
I just-
you each take a piece. It's good.
Yeah. He doesn't understand that that's not how babies work.
Sharing is caring.
My daddy said that's how twins are made. They all lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us grow the audience by sharing us with your friends or giving us a share on social media. And we love hearing from you. You can reach out on our website at bsfa.cc.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi.